All right. Well, so an official welcome to everyone and thank you big time for joining us for the session early in the morning. I'm sure in Canada and in uh, I'm sorry about that. In Canada and in the US, it's still quite early. In the UK, we have people joining us from all over the world. So it's maybe at some parts of the world, like in China, it's already quite late. So thank you so much for joining us in today's session. Today I would first introduce Tanya to you. So Tanya is the Associate Director of Global Workplace Solutions at CBRE. CBRE is a Fortune 500 company and the world's largest real estate firm. She has over 14 years of experience in establishing, implementing, and maintaining ISO environmental and energy management systems across a portfolio of several global clients. At CBRE, she leads the ISO 14001 and 50001 delivery team, guiding all aspects of certification, from management system gap analyses to facilitating external audits and creating environmental training packages. So today, as you all know, she will be talking about discussing the ISO 14001 fundamentals and just some basics. Going back to the basics is always a good thing. So just to show you what the go-to training panel, in this session, we are able to, as you can see in our past webinars, we were not able to chat with each other, but in this session, whatever comments and questions you send in the chat panel, they would be visible to everyone else. So, we want you to network with each other. Just if you can still, the ones who are joining us right now, if you can just send in your name and your the company, organization you're working for, it would be great. I have so many more. That's Albert Condello, Teresa, Diane Holman, Sanat Pafser, Janice Pilgrim, Michael Davies. So we have a lot of people joining us today. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much again for your time. In the go-to panel, it is possible for you to switch on your camera, but the control is with me. So later during the session, if you would like to switch on, if you would like to introduce yourself, after the presentation, and if you're willing to switch on your camera, let me know, and I can let you switch on the camera. I have muted you as well. Later after the presentation, if you want to ask your question directly to Tanya, you can just raise your hand, and then I would introduce you. I would unmute you so you can ask your question directly from Tanya. Also, feel free to send in your questions anytime. I'll keep a note of all the questions you're sending in, and then first come first serve basis, we'll ask Tanya all the questions. Just a bit about today's conference. So we have, I'm not sure if this is the conference, the only session you're attending, or attending other sessions too, but this is the first time we are hosting an online conference. So we have invited speakers from leading organizations to share compliance challenges. If you're attending, the next session we have is a panel discussion with compliance experts from France Canada and France Mountain. And after that, we're having a session on quality management system, taking the stress out of quality management system. The sessions are already full, so unfortunately, if you haven't registered now, it's not the time, but we'll make the recordings available later during the day, later in the day. And just a bit about mnemonic for those of you who are not aware, who are attending this session, who are attending a webinar series for the first time. Mnemonic is all about helping environmental health and safety and quality professionals comply with the rules and regulations. We have a database of of environmental health and safety regulations covering over 100 countries and 200 jurisdictions. And we also offer an auditing app, which you can use on any kind of a mobile device or on the web, iOS or Android. So I think that's a lot of talking. I'll just quickly send in a link to, so if you're interested, we have a very interesting compliance podcast series, which would be of interest to everyone. So I'll just quickly send in a link to that if you would like to listen later. So here it is. So I just sent in a link. Maybe you should check out the podcast series if you have time later. That's all on my end, Tanya. It's all over to you. We are ready to start the presentation. We already have like 60 people arrived already, so let's start.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'm just going to start by saying the way that this system works. I can only see my slides, so I can't see myself and I can't see you. So I might have a little lapse where I forget that you're there and that you can see me. So if I start looking off in the distance or having a scratch or something, remind me that you can all see me. As Jess already said, I also won't be able to see the chat once I start moving forward through my slides. So Jess, please, if anything comes up, please feel free to interrupt me. Let me know if there's a pertinent question that anyone wants me to address. In case anyone hasn't noticed already, I am British as well, and I think British people in general, we tend to use quite a lot of phrases and sayings. If I say anything and you just think, what does that mean? Just put it on the chat, let me know, and I'll try and think of another way of saying it. As Jess has already introduced, so the purpose of the session is to give a very broad brush overview of 14001, and I've tried to pull out some of the elements that I think are fundamental. So over 15 years of experience working directly in environmental management. I've had the privilege, the pleasure to work for a real broad range of organisations in both the private and public sectors. So I've worked with a lot of organisations to try and help them improve the impact they have upon the environment. So the idea of today is to share with you some of that experience and some of the things that I've seen that are good and some of the things that I've seen that are bad, to try and help you if you are going to go forward and implement 14001 in your organisation. So again, as Jessica noted, I work for a company called CBRE. So if anybody's not familiar with CBRE, we're a huge real estate company. We're really huge, unprecedented scale, scope, service offerings. We're a global leader in the provision of occupier services. So people essentially outsource their occupier services to us. So I work for a division of CBRE called Global Workspace Solutions. So essentially, we're a leading provider in integrated facilities management. So we primarily work with building occupiers. We essentially try and work with clients to say that your place of work, whether that's a retail outlet, a laboratory, a data center, manufacturing outlet, or even if it's a virtual location, your place of work can be an advantage to your business. So your place of work is intrinsically linked to your productivity, your reliability, your engagement, your quality, your whole brand. And so what our business does is work with you to help maximize all of those things so that you can get material benefit from the place where you work. So in Global Workplace Solutions, we essentially deliver three kind of core service offerings. That's facilities management, advisory and transactions, and projects. And then underpinning all of that is energy and sustainability. So we essentially work with our clients to help them kind of buy smart, use smart, and be responsible. So we do all kinds of different services across the energy and sustainability agenda. So we do things like helping our clients to get best prices for the utilities, to get accurate billing, to procure energy, bill validation, capital project delivery. This is just to mention a few of the services that we deliver. So specifically, what I work on under that umbrella is the ISO service offering. So we offer assistance to either fully implement, to maintain, or just to give a helping hand, a bit of support, a bit of enabling to our clients, whatever degree of support that they want to implement their own ISO system. So we implement ISO 14001 for environmental management, ISO 50001 covering energy management, and ISO 20400 for sustainable procurement. So let's start then talking about ISO 14001. So, oh, I just heard a strange noise there. I'm going to carry on, hoping everyone can still hear me. Environmental management systems then. Okay, so essentially we are aiming to manage the environmental impacts of our organisation. We want to ensure that our corporate environment policy is complied with, and we want to ensure that environmental legislation is complied with. We're essentially saying ISO 14001 is environmental management best practice. This is the absolute best way you can do it. So it specifies the requirements that you can use to facilitate a systematic approach to managing the environment rather than a reactionary haphazard kind of ad hoc approach to things as and when they happen. This is about being systematic and proactive in your approach to managing your environmental impacts. So due to the systematic nature of ISO and ISO standards in general, what I see time and time again is organisations becoming really concerned and fixated with the processes, the documentation, things like version control, and they lose sight of what the point of ISO 14001 is, and that's environmental protection. So it should always be remembered that the overall objective of the EMS is about protection of the environment. So it means reducing your negative impacts and enhancing the positive ones that you have on the environment. So your system should always be bespoke. So you should never be thinking that you can go from one organisation to another and cut and paste an ISO 14001 system. That's not how it works. It should always be directly related to your core business. So you need to think about what it is that you do. Where do you sit in the world? Where does your organisation sit in the world? How do you interact with the environment? And how does the environment interact with you? And it should be very specific to the nature of your business. So the latest version of 14001, the 2015 version, addresses this point in its clauses on context. So essentially, that's all about how your core business impacts upon the environment and the priorities of your core business, and then linking that to how you are defining your environmental management system. So that's my first practical tip, and I'm going to try and keep giving you practical tips throughout this presentation, and that's that ISO 14001 is not cut and paste. You need to make it about you and about your organisation. So people might be familiar with other certification schemes, particularly, say, for example, LEED. And they might be thinking to yourself, okay, what does 14001 offer me that another certification scheme doesn't offer me? And the most important thing to remember here is that ISO 14001 is a management system. It's not a building rating system. Okay, so if I give you an example of that, one of the clients that I work with at the minute is a global financial institution. So we spend quite a bit of time with them talking about real estate and how they manage their real estate and all the kind of normal things you might think of, waste and energy and water management. But we also spend a considerable amount of time talking about the financial services that they offer to their clients. So, for example, they do environmental screening of the finance packages that they offer their clients. They also offer financial packages that will not lead to the investment of certain industries or products, such as, say, palm oil. And they also offer financial packages to their clients that will promote other industries, such as renewable technology industries. So you can see it's very much, their environmental impacts are very much connected to their core business, rather than just being about real estate and the way that they manage their building. So also what ISO can do for you, it means that you can have one system applied across multiple sites. You don't have to have a common set of criteria. It promotes continuous improvement. It promotes regular evaluation of compliance. You're required to have on-site regular scrutiny through the audit processes. Most other certification schemes don't require that kind of level of scrutiny. And then also it has worldwide applicability. So this is what I often see again and again, is that people forget that the worldwide applicability nature of the ISO standard. So this is my next kind of big tip for you, is to think big. Don't run your system in a silo. So that silo shouldn't be thematic or geographic. So you'll have a much better and effective system if it's fully integrated into your business. And if your business is global, so should your system be. So Jess, I'm going to go over to you now for a quick poll. Hopefully this the technology will work.
Of course. So I'm going to launch the poll, Tanya. Are you currently managing ISO 14001 certification? So we just launched a poll. You can see on your screen if you're currently managing ISO 14001 certification. So please answer it. We have like 10 seconds maybe to answer if you're doing it, or if you're not doing it, or if you have done it in the past. So I think most of the people have answered. So I'm going to share the results. Let me see. So we have 43% people saying they are managing ISO 14001 certification. 33% are saying they are not managing ISO 14001 certification, and 23% have done it in the past. So the vast majority, almost 65-70%, have dealt with ISO 14001 certification.
Excellent. And then if we could move on to
share the results. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Okay.
Okay, if we could move on to our next poll question as well, straight up afterwards.
Okay, perfect. So are you running integrated management systems with other ISO standards?
We did the other one, Jess, sorry.
Okay, perfect. All right, so are you running ISO certifications at the facility level, country level, or are you doing it globally? Okay, so I think we can close the poll now. We have, I'll just share the results with you. 60% are doing it at a facility level, 13% are doing it at country level, and 27% are doing it globally. So let me share the results.
27% globally. Can you tell me the other ones again, Jess?
Here you go. Can you see the screen, Tanya?
No, I can't see what you're sharing.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So 60% are doing it at the facility level, 13% at country level, and 27% are doing it globally. So there's a vast majority, like 27% is one small number, I would say. So we have like 27% people managing these systems globally.
Okay. So the people, so the 60% running the site-based implementation, that might be entirely appropriate for you. If you only have one site in your operations, that might be entirely appropriate for you. However, I would suggest to you, if you do operate in a larger business, that going for multiple site certification will save you a lot of time, money, effort, resource. There are some real efficiencies and economies that can be made by essentially going bigger. So really something to think about. Right, Jess, if I could get the control of the slides back.
Perfect. You should have the control of the slides though.
Can you see my slides in full screen mode?
We can. You
can see it in full screen mode. Okay.
No, not in full screen mode though.
Just bear with me. I don't know. Aha. Okay, done. Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay.
Okay. So leading on then. So as much as I've talked about geographic integration, I think you should also think as much as you possibly can about thematic integration. So in particular, other ISO standards, there's a real synergy in the core structure of a lot of how the ISO standards are set up, and thematic similarities. So I talked before about the other standards that my team work on, and we work on all these standards for a reason, because they share so many common elements. So if we take ISO 50001, for example, and compare it clause by clause next to ISO 14001, ISO 50001 actually only has about 4 unique clauses. So there's only 4 extra things you need to do on top of what you're already doing for ISO 14001 to get ISO 50001. Similarly, there's a lot of common shared content with ISO 2400 on sustainable procurement, which is a newer standard, and then the health and safety standard is very new, the 45001. Again, shares a common structure. I haven't mentioned quality on here, but I saw a few of you on the chat coming up as being quality managers. The same can be said with quality, shared common structure. So again, Jess, if we could go back and do the next poll, I'd be really interested to see how many people are operating any integrated systems.
Perfect. So are you running integrated management systems with other ISO standards? If you're doing it with 45001, 2400, or 50001, or any other ISO standard, or if you're doing none at all? All right, maybe 2 more seconds. Okay, that's okay. So Tanya, we have 44% people are not managing integrated management systems. So that's the vast majority. But 24% are doing it with 45001, 28%, so that's 50%, are doing it with another ISO standard. Just 0%, nobody is managing doing it with 2400, and just 4% are doing it with 50001.
Okay.
I'm going to share the results with everyone so they can see the results. But if you want, I can say them loud for you again.
No, that's fine. I got it. So, I mean,
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense with the trends that we see. So, for anyone who doesn't know, who's interested, ISO each year publish a report on the uptake for their kind of top 10 international standards. So you can see kind of by sector and by country, by region, what's the uptake for each of the standards. And we definitely see far significantly lower numbers of people taking up 50,001 by comparison to 14,001. Health and safety is gaining traction, gaining popularity. So I think those figures kind of match up with the levels that we see, but there is a growing trend in 50,001. So you can manage energy as part of a 14,001 system, of course, but if you want to manage it in great detail and really kind of drive home a continual improvement cycle that's driven much more by efficiency and cost savings, then 50,001 is a good standard to consider. Okay, so I will try and get this back onto full screen view. Just bear with me. There we are. Okay. All right, so fundamental elements then of 14,001. We have to talk about environmental aspects. So people use this kind of impact and aspects as an interchangeable kind of term, and for the most part that's fine, but there is a distinction between it. So the aspect is the element of the organization's activities or products or services that interacts with or can interact with the environment. So the impact essentially is to change to the environment that occurs, and that change can be positive or negative. It can be wholly or partially related to the aspect, but the impact is essentially the change, and the aspect is what you're doing. But broadly speaking, people will just say environmental impacts and aspects, and that's fine. People will know what you're talking about. So essentially what you're trying to do is identify, okay, how are we impacting the environment? And it's a really big question. So the best way to do this, and the recommendation I make to you, is to use the life cycle framework as the framework of your thought process, of your however you're approaching this in your organization. You might be doing a workshop with various people, but my suggestion to you is to use the life cycle stages as your framework for that thought process, for that discussion, whatever it is that you might be doing. So those processes are okay, starting right at the beginning from materials that you use, the raw material extraction. So way before that material gets to you, where's it coming from? Then your specification design, your procurement, your actual service delivery, your use, and then your transport up until final disposal. Those are the stages that you need to think through to be able to identify your impacts. So the kind of standard impacts we're thinking about utilities, energy, water, waste, materials and chemicals, any kind of waste that you're producing, any discharges, think air, water, land, land contamination, air pollution, transport, any kind of transport activities you have. So not just if you have a fleet, this might be about just your staff, how they're getting to work. And then your building activities, so your building maintenance activities. A good tip here is to think about the different conditions that you work in. So you've got your normal operating conditions. So if we take an office, say that we work 9 to 5. 9 to 5 is your normal operating conditions. Now outside of your 9 to 5, you might have security, doing inspections. You might have cleaners going around the building. So it's part of your business to have security, to have cleaning, or to have maintenance as part of your business, but it's not the norm. It's not your normal operating condition. So we call that abnormal. So think about, our risks increased? Is potential damage to the environment increased during those abnormal operating procedures, areas? And then finally think about the emerged situation. So the building's on fire. everybody's running out. What's the potential impact of the environment under those conditions as well? When you've identified these aspects, you then need to essentially rate them for significance. How you rate them for significance is not defined by the standard. You need to decide that for yourselves. You need to essentially establish criteria to define your significance. That might include things like severity or likelihood of occurrence. And then once you've identified which of your environmental aspects are your significant ones, that's what your management system should be focusing on. So next I've got a little kind of case study to show you. So this is from an office headquarters that we dealt with. And it was the perception of this organisation that their headquarters would have little or no significance in terms of the way that they were impacting upon the environment. So they kind of perceived, office operations to be low risk compared to their manufacturing facilities. So we completed an initial environmental assessment of the site, and these pictures are just really are a small snapshot of what we found. So in the first photograph, you can see we found a considerable amount, this is a lot more than we could capture in one photo, of fluorescent tubes, waste fluorescent tubes dumped in an outside area, smashed, broken, releasing mercury into the environment. And in terms of the hazardous substances you have in an office environment, this is pretty much one of the worst things that you can do for the environment. So this was at the back of the building. Then we had the middle photograph is a picture of an oil storage tank that they had. The tank was really old, really rusty, not in good condition, no labelling whatsoever, no hazard warning labelling, no indication of what was in the tank unless you knew. The bund wall, which is supposed to catch spills and stop that being released to drain, is completely exposed to the elements, so filling up with rainwater. And then as they had oil spills, the oil was mixing into the rainwater, and this would fill up periodically. And their management practice for this was to then essentially pump this out of the bund down the drain. And it just kind of it's beyond belief, really. When you get answers to questions like that when you visit a site, you kind of think, okay, get the person to say it again, say it again to me, and does it make sense to you what you're doing? So the bund wall is there to contain spills, to stop them going down the drain, and you are once a month routinely coming out and removing it from the bund and putting it down the drain. So yeah, and that's not the only time I've found that as well. It's more common than it should be. And then the last photo is a photograph of their loading bay. So you can see that they're completely overrun with waste, real problems with waste management. This is project waste and just normal operation waste, completely overrun, ill-managed loading bay area here. So you can see, some really quite serious issues we found in what they perceived to be their easiest, most straightforward location. So this is just really kind of like a reminder that with the environment, your potential to have negative impacts is huge, even in the places that you think are your simplest operations. So alongside managing your environmental aspects comes compliance. So managing compliance is really tough. It's a really difficult job. So the legal and regulatory framework across the world is very complex. It's very difficult. Now, if you are an environmental manager or worse, you're a health and safety manager who's had environment stuck on the end of your job title, or another job, and somebody said to you, pick up environment, and so you're just trying to do this in the, the few hours at the end of the day, it is near on impossible for you to keep on top of a changing legal and regulatory landscape. It's an incredibly challenging job, and I would say to you, it's a very high risk approach to do that. And I would say that if you were just operating your system as I think 60% of you are for just a single site. Now, if you start scaling that up to multiple sites in multiple jurisdictions or countries, I would suggest to you that that's impossible for an individual environmental manager to do and to keep on top of in any meaningful way, in any way that actually results in you managing risk. So it's because of that issue is why we at CBRE partner with a software scheme like Mnemonic, because essentially it enables us to be more efficient, save our time, save our resources, and significantly reduce our exposure to risk. Now, what ISO wants you to do is not only think about all of that, which is complicated enough, but it wants you to go further and think about your other requirements, okay? So now by other requirements, essentially what we're talking about is voluntary commitments being made non-voluntary in your system. So a lot of the organisations I work with, for example, are committed to producing annual CSR reports. They might do voluntary peer ranking schemes like FTSE for Good. And essentially what the standard is requiring you to do to make those kind of commitments mandatory and have the same weighting in your system that a legal requirement would have. So failure to produce your CSR report, for example, would result in a non-conformity in exactly the same way as a omission of a legal requirement. So don't forget the voluntary commitments as well. They're broad ranging. It might be from a commitment in a landlord agreement to an industry standard or a code of practice. You know, it really can be quite wide ranging what can be applicable as a compliance requirement in your ISO 14001 system. So I've talked so far about kind of planning aspects and desk-based kind of exercises that you have to do to set up your system. So I want to move it on a little bit now to talk a bit more about how communication and awareness is so fundamental to any 14001 system. I'm going to start by telling you a personal story, something that happened to me. So my first day, my first proper job after leaving university, I was very keen to make a good impression, as you can imagine, and I went to work. I had a very good day, and I got shown around the office floor and where to make a cup of tea, very important, and I was given lots and lots of reading to do. So the end of the day comes around, you know, kind of 5 o'clock, people start to leave, and I think, no, I'm not going to leave. I've got so much to read, so much to learn. I'm going to stay here a bit late this evening. So I said goodbye to everybody else, and and then before I knew it, I kind of looked around and I was the only person left in the office. So it was about 7 o'clock, and I thought, okay, yeah, it's my first day. I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna go home now. So go downstairs, back through the reception that I'd come in that morning. All the lights were on and it was all normal, but there was nobody sitting at the reception desk. So I just walked past through the reception out to the automatic doors at the front of the building. Now, how the building is there was 2 sets of glass automatic doors, which essentially was like a porch area in between the 2. So I walk up to the first set of automatic doors, they open, I go through them, I get to the second set of doors, they don't open. As I get closer, I kind of think, oh, is it the sensor, is it me? I wave at the sensor. And it won't open, and I see that it's been locked. So the top and bottom lock of the glass door have been locked. So I think, okay, fine. So maybe at this time of night you have to exit the building in another way. So I turn around. As I turn around, the automatic doors that I've just come through, they close behind me. And as I walk up to them, they won't reopen. So I'm stuck in the porch. And then across the reception, I can then see the cleaner right at the far side of the reception turn off the lights and close the door behind her. As I see her doing this, I start to bang on the glass and I start to shout and try and get her attention. She doesn't hear me. So there I am, stood in the glass porch. Don't know what to do. It's getting dark. I'm on my own. It's quite a quiet street, and I managed to see a man crossing over the other side of the road. And I scream and I shout, and I get his attention. He comes over, and there's a tiny crack in the glass doors. And I managed to speak to him through the crack and ask him for help. And he wasn't the friendliest man. And he kind of said that he couldn't help me, and I was going to have to call the fire service. And he was in a rush, and he had to go. So he left me there. So I really didn't want to call the fire service. So I then got my mobile phone. And for the young people on the call, that when I had my mobile phone, it wasn't a smartphone. They didn't exist then. It was just a phone. So you had to, at the time, if you wanted to call anyone, you had to ring a directory service, a person. So I called the directory service, and I was trying to get number for the people that rang the building, the caretaker. I told the lady the situation I was in. We became friends on the phone, and she tried to help me. And every number she tried to call for me was saying it was out of hours, was going to answering machine. And it was just, you know, all the stars aligned against me, and my phone was running out of battery. I think I had 5% left. And the lady on the phone just told me, you know, again, what I really didn't want to hear is you have to ring the fire service. So I did. I had to call the emergency services. And a few minutes later, there were sirens coming down the street, and the fire engine kind of pulled up, and then all these firefighters jumped off the fire engine. They all kind of, you know, walked over to me, laughing at me, pointing at me, taking the mickey. And you know, I was like a beetroot. I was so embarrassed. And after several minutes of taking the mickey out of me, they said to me they were going to have to smash the entire glass front of the building in order to get me out. And I begged them not to. And I said, no, it's my first day. I will sleep in here. Please do not smash the front of this building. And they said, we can't leave you here. We're going to have to. And then thankfully, my luck came in, and the caretaker of the building just happened by chance to be driving past the building and saw the fire engine and stopped to come over and see what was happening. And he had the keys on him, and he was able to let me out. And so they didn't have to smash the front of the building, but the firefighters did jeer and shout at me as I had to kind of walk off with my head hanging low. And the next morning when I went back to the office, everybody was laughing at me and the new girl and how she got locked in reception. But my manager, he didn't laugh, and he was very sorry, because he knew that what he hadn't done was tell me that everybody in the building should go to security and be given an electronic pass to be able to exit the building. He assumed that everybody knew they had to go to security and get an electronic pass. And no, everybody doesn't know. So this is my story to tell you that everybody doesn't know what you know. Things to you that might seem really obvious may not be obvious to other people. So I've got another couple of examples here in the photographs of sites that I've worked at. So the first picture here is a very environmentally damaging chemical that the people on the site were required to decant into buckets. And so the individual in this example, the tap on the front of the container was very slow. The flow was very slow. So in an effort to be helpful, he thought he was being helpful, and he bashed off the front of the tap so that the liquid would flow out more freely and more quickly. It resulted in a very significant spill. All of which is not captured in that photograph, but it was born out of good. This incident was born out of good intention. You know, he thought the priority of the exercise that he was completing was speed, and didn't think about the environmental consequences of what he was doing. The second example here, this is a fuel tank. So the backstory to this is that this organisation did used to have a series of underground fuel tanks, and one underground fuel tank in particular. The fuel kept disappearing, and so the operatives on site decided they thought the fuel was being stolen. So for a period of about a year, they kept reordering fuel, kept having the fuel delivered again and again, and they eventually discovered that the whole tank underneath had breached, and the fuel had leaked into the ground, and all the fuel had been essentially contaminated the ground, and so they had to remove all of the underground fuel tanks. Essentially, all of them were breached, and they had to essentially implement overground tanks. So they thought that these overground tanks, okay, these are fantastic new tanks. These are going to solve all of our problems. We won't have any more spills. The technology can't fail us. So a delivery driver turned up one day to the tank, and the operative on the site couldn't find the key to open the shutter at the front. So if you see on the left-hand side, you've got a shutter. They couldn't open the shutter. So they had a little chat, and the guy wanted to be helpful. So he wanted to help, and he didn't want the delivery driver to have had a wasted trip. So he essentially found a ladder. He went up the top of the tank and said, okay, we can fill it at the point at the top. Without appreciating or understanding that that tank's actually an air vent, the tank is skinned, and so when they tried to deliver the fuel into the air vent, the fuel entirely breached the tank, and we had a significant spill incident. So the point is here that even if you have a really good technology, even if you have some really new fancy kit, you need to communicate your operational controls, you need to communicate your priorities to your staff and to your people, otherwise they won't be effective and they won't work. So internal audits then. So the purpose of the internal audit is to verify conformance to a set of requirements, to evaluate effectiveness. But what I see frequently is the whole potential of internal audits not being used by a lot of people that operate 14,001 systems. So your internal audit is your main kind of interface. It's your main interface with most of the people on your site. So you should really use it to communicate, to educate, to engage your senior management, to promote behavior change. You should do all of those things with it. Internal audits should not be perceived as any less important than your external audits in the management of your system. So in one of the worst examples I've seen with a client, we had a regular practice of an internal audit being conducted the day before an external audit, and they would just write the internal audit report up just the night in between the two. This made the internal audit entirely pointless, entirely ineffective. It gave the site no time to react to any of the findings, no time to prepare, and essentially the only reason they were writing the internal audit report was to be able to have something to show the external auditor the next day to tick a box. That's really not the point, and not what you should be using internal audits for. So what I would say to you is use that time to really show people that you're the subject matter expert, that you can help them. Communicate the results widely. I'd really encourage you, if you've got multiple sites, to publish results in a way that compares one site to another, compares results of an audit to previous audits. Really do anything and everything you can to engage senior management, to engage the people at the site in the results of the audit. And why, help them to understand why they're so important and so valuable. You should also use them to make sure that you give recognition to good practice. So again, I see that again and again, people only going in and using an audit as if you're in there as in a function to tell people off. And you should really, really use the opportunity to highlight what is good about what's happening at the site. Because if you share best practice, hopefully the best practice will spread as well. So when you're conducting internal audits, I'd really like to stress some of the worst audits I see is when people just tick boxes. So a checklist can be part of an audit, but it's not the entire part of an audit. Okay, so ticking yes, no in a box doesn't really justify you as an auditor in what you're doing. It doesn't really tell anybody what you've checked and when and how. It doesn't really tell a story or engage senior management, and it doesn't help the people on site to understand, what their gaps are and what they should be doing. You should always be thinking about three main modes of gathering evidence when you're doing internal audit. So first of all, by interview, secondly by observation, and then thirdly by document review. And then when you have a finding, you should be looking for two of those methods to verify the validity of the finding that you have. what that means is essentially that you're going to be talking to people, talk to as many people as possible. I think it's a really good technique to be conversational with people. I think you get a lot more out of them than if you sit in a more formal structure and try and grill them with a checklist. Use your eyes, walk around the site, say what you see, and make sure that you back up both of those with documentation reviews. You also need to accept with audits that it's a sampling approach. You can't audit everything all the time, and if you try to, that might stop you from following audit trails. You should accept that one time in an audit you might go on a particular route, and another time on an audit you might go on another route, and that's good. There's value in that, so accept that your internal audit is a sampling exercise. So everything I've spoken about is based on the cycle of continual improvement, and as are many ISO standards, essentially what we're trying to do is always improve the impact that we have on the environment and improve the system itself. So what I would say to you is that again, another mistake I see in many organisations is that they think this cycle of continual improvement is a big, long process. So they think it's kind of like a 1 year or even worse, a process for the whole 3-year cycle. And they'll save up all their improvement ideas or suggestions for a big conversation at the end of the year and then implement them all in one go. And if we think about that in project management terms, that's what we call a waterfall methodology. And what I would say to you is that you need to think more in terms of an agile project management style. So the cycle of continuous improvement should be happening all the time, little and often. So if you think about your phone, think about your smartphone, if there's like a software glitch or a little software improvement that needs to happen, these updates to our apps and our phones, they happen all the time, they happen constantly. You don't wait kind of 1, 2, 3 years and bring out a whole new phone. So think about being agile, think about embracing change. That's how you'll get the most out of your system. So I've gone through and there's been 10 practical tips, and I'll just summarize them for you now. So remember then that ISO 14001 is not cut and paste. You've got to make it about you and your organization. Think big, don't run your system in silos, thematically or geographically. Leverage existing systems and existing work and priorities within your organization to help you improve your own efficiency and get more profile. Use the lifecycle stages to help you identify all the ways your organization impacts upon the environment, and think beyond mandatory compliance. Consider what other commitments are important to you in your organization. Remember, everyone does not know what you know. Well-designed procedures and controls can prevent deviation from desired results, but only if you communicate them. Internal audits are a powerful tool. Don't just use them to find non-conformities. Also use them to communicate, to train, to promote behaviour change, to engage your senior management. Don't just think about internal audits and audits in general to be about finding the bad, but also use them to highlight the good. Don't just think about auditing for ticking boxes. Checklists can be part of an audit, but they're not a whole audit by any means. And then finally, embrace change. Okay, cycle of continued improvement, little and often, regular change all the time. So then the last kind of thought from me, I also have seen many organisations run ISO 14001 systems that are they run systems that are equivalent to ISO 14001, and they don't go on to go and get certification. So what I would say to you is that 14001 is environmental management at its highest possible standard. It gives you actionable strategies to reduce risk. Okay, so in the kind of world we live in, the climate and the times, there's environmental greenwash everywhere. Successful and meaningful management of environmental risk and impacts is much harder to find. So certification tells everybody, it tells your clients, your customers, shareholders, your neighbours, your own employees, that you're serious about managing the environment, and not only are you serious about it, but you're doing it in the best possible world-class way that you can do it. And you're so confident that you're doing it in the best possible world-class way that you're prepared to let an external independent person come in to your organisation to verify that on a regular basis. So in my opinion, 14001 really is kind of the icing on the cake. And why wouldn't you get recognition for work that you're really doing by going that extra step for certification? So that's the end of my presentation. and happy to open up to questions.
Well, thank you so much, Tanya, for all the insights that you shared with us. I really enjoyed your wonderful stories, and I think it's from the stories that we learn the most. Anyone can come and give a presentation on, the theoretical things, but it's only from your personal experiences that you have seen as an external auditor or helping companies, the kind of things that you see. Those are the kind of things you just don't find anywhere. And I was very happy to hear all the stories and mistakes that people make and learn from their mistakes. So I'm sure the attendees felt the same way. I'm not sure if you're able to send me the questions. I don't have any questions right now, but please feel free to send in your questions. In the meantime, I would just like to say that we can help you with, so compliance obligations is one part of ISO 14001 certification, and Mnemonic helps organizations do exactly that. We have a database of over, our database covers more than 100 countries and over 200 jurisdictions. So if you would like help with compliance obligations, please let us know. You can send us a message. You can go to the website mnemonic.com, and you can send us a request for that, and we'll get in touch soon. I'm not sure if I'm not able. Are you able to? Can someone, Neil? Can you let us know if you're able to send in your questions here? I have someone raised. I have people raised hands. Okay. Okay, so that's Pierre Lecole. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. How do you deal with different regulatory requirements across different non-compatible compliance regulations?
So I think I mentioned. So we actually partner with Mnemonic. Hence that we're here today. We have a really good relationship with Mnemonic. So I think this is, and hopefully I got this across in the presentation, I think this is really hard. We work across multiple countries, legislation requirements are very kind of bespoke to each country, and beyond that, each kind of jurisdiction within that country, it's incredibly difficult to keep a handle on. I consider myself to be pretty good and pretty up to speed on UK legislation. It's where I live, it's my job. I see the news regularly. I feel like I can keep a handle on that. Once you start going beyond that, and particularly once you start going into different languages, it's incredibly difficult. And so essentially we think, I think it's okay sometimes to say you need help, and there are people that this is their expertise, and so seek help, and don't try and do this all yourself, because I think you really are exposing yourself to quite a lot of risk.
Thank you, Tanya. Anyone else, if you have any questions? Albert Contello is asking if in the UK auditors require certifications to BEACEM. I'm not sure what that is.
No, I'm not sure what that is either. But so to do internal audits, we have to approve competency. How the competency is defined is determined by the organisation itself. And then to be an external auditor, there are more specific registration qualification schemes that you have to do, which I think is the same as all around the world.
We have Lise Patax. I'm not sure. They're saying that if you could go back to the previous slide. Lise, can you tell us which slide you would like us to go back to?
Is this the right one?
I'm just waiting for Lise to respond. Oh, yes, it is. If anyone else would like to ask questions straight from Tanya, I can unmute you as well. You can. Are you working for Kazakhstan now, or would you like to work in Kazakhstan? You have a job offer, Tanya. Are you working in Kazakhstan now, or would you like to work in Kazakhstan?
So CBRE works everywhere.
Okay.
Personally, I'm not. No, I've never been there. No.
All right. So. Okay, Elise, do you have any question on this particular slide? Because I don't see your question. Oh, you just maybe they just wanted to see the slide. If anyone else has any questions, please let us know now. Okay, you just wanted the notes. All right. Okay, perfect. We'll be posting the presentation, the recording of this presentation on our website as well later today after we have all the sessions, and it will be available to you. If you want, we can even send it to you by email. So to let us know. If anyone else, we have like 50 people here still. If anyone else has any other questions, this is a time you can ask, and Tanya doesn't answer questions every day. So if you have any other questions, this is the time, or we can move on to the next session. Okay, so I think that's all for the questions. Yes, Michael, we would email the slides. Okay, if you want the slides, we will send you the slides for sure. For everyone who's still here, when you exit the webinar, you'll see a post-webinar survey. Please leave us your comments whether you liked the webinar, or for any comments regarding the webinar, or what kind of topics you would like us to cover in the future. Thanks, Michael. Also, if you would like, if you want us, Mnemonic, to get in touch with you to help you with compliance obligations, please do mention that in the post-webinar survey as well. Virginia, we'll send the slides. We'll send the slides to everyone. So if you need the slides, you don't really have to send it in the chat. That's all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this wonderful session. Thank you so much, Tanya, for taking time out. I know you spent a lot of time preparing the presentation, and you've been investing a lot of time. Thank you so much for all the stories you shared. I enjoyed them so much. And thank you, Neil. Everyone's saying thank you to Tanya. And hopefully we'll have another presentation with you again in the future, Tanya.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye.